Right now, as you watch this video, one of the most consequential air campaigns in modern American military history is unfolding over the skies of Iran. Operation Epic Fury began in the early hours of February 28, 2026, when United States and Israeli forces launched a sweeping, coordinated strike campaign targeting Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, air defense networks, drone manufacturing facilities, and command and control nodes. It is the largest American military operation in the Middle East since the Iraq War, and, at the center of it, flying mission after mission from the decks of two aircraft carriers in the region, is an aircraft that most people have never heard of. That aircraft is the EA-18G Growler, and, without it, the entire operation would look completely different. Before a single bomb fell on Iranian soil, before stealth bombers crossed into defended airspace, before fighter jets launched from carrier decks, the Growlers were already at work. Their mission was to blind, confuse, and dismantle the very systems Iran relies on to detect and engage incoming aircraft. Iran had spent decades and billions of dollars building one of the most layered and sophisticated integrated air defense systems in the Middle East. It combined Russian-origin surface-to-air missile batteries, domestically produced radar networks, and distributed command infrastructure designed to make attacking aircraft pay a steep price. The Growler's job was to make that entire architecture irrelevant before the shooting even started. Defense analysts covering Operation Epic Fury have described the EA-18G as the indispensable ghost of the campaign. 18 Growler aircraft, operating from the USS Gerald R Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, have been flying continuous suppression missions against Iranian air defenses since the operation began. One analyst put it plainly when he wrote that the Growler is the single most critical factor in the United States Navy's ability to operate within Iran's contested airspace. While stealth bombers like the B-2 Spirit rely on their low radar signature to avoid detection, the Growler takes a different approach entirely. It does not hide from enemy radar. It destroys enemy radar. It jams the signals, burns out the receivers, and fires anti-radiation missiles that home in on any system that dares to emit a signal. The loadout imagery released by United States Central Command during Operation Epic Fury told a story that electronic warfare specialists found remarkable. A Growler from Electronic Attack Squadron 133, the Wizards, was photographed launching from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, configured with 4 AGM-88 anti-radiation missiles, 2 AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, 2 external fuel tanks carrying 480 gallons each, and a combination of jamming pods that included both the legacy ANALQ-99 tactical jamming system and the newer ANALQ-249 next generation. That is not a typical peacetime training configuration. That is a wartime loadout designed for an aircraft that is expected to go deep into a contested environment, find enemy radar systems, jam them, and then kill them if they refuse to go quiet. The mixed jamming pod configuration was particularly notable to analysts. Typically, Growlers carry either the older ALQ-99 pods or the newer ALQ-249 pods, not both on the same aircraft at the same time. The fact that crews were flying with one of each suggests a deliberate decision to balance frequency coverage. With the two pod types operating across different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, to ensure that no Iranian radar system operating in any frequency band could escape detection and jamming. The ALQ-249, which uses active electronically scanned array technology, represents a major leap forward in jamming capability, offering faster response times, broader bandwidth coverage, and a modular architecture that allows new threat libraries to be uploaded rapidly as conditions change in the battlespace. The 4 anti-radiation missile configuration was equally telling. In standard operations, a Growler typically carries 2 anti-radiation missiles for hard-kill suppression of enemy air defense missions. Doubling that load means the aircraft was expected to engage multiple radar targets in a single sortie, working its way through Iranian air defense positions with enough magazine depth to handle threats as they presented themselves. The two AIM-120 missiles loaded for self-defense confirmed that the aircraft was not operating in the safe rear areas of the battlespace. It was flying close enough to the fight that air-to-air threats were a realistic concern, and the crew needed the ability to defend themselves while simultaneously jamming and killing ground-based radar systems. The strategic impact of the Growler's work in Operation Epic Fury has been profound. United States Central Command reported that Iranian ballistic missile launches dropped by 86% within the first several days of the operation, a direct result of the combined effort to suppress radar networks, destroy missile launch infrastructure, and degrade the command and control systems that coordinate Iranian strike operations. The Growlers did not do all of that alone, but they made it possible for every other platform in the campaign to operate with a level of freedom that would have been unthinkable against an intact Iranian air defense network. The B-52s that flew sustained bombardment missions over Iran could not have done so without the electromagnetic shield the Growlers provided. The F-35s that struck hardened facilities deep inside the country flew into an environment that the Growlers had already shaped to their advantage. Every bomb that found its target in Operation Epic Fury owed something to the Growlers that went in first. That is the nature of electronic warfare, and it is the reason the EA-18G Growler exists. To understand why this aircraft matters so much, and why the United States military has invested so heavily in it for so long, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to understand where the Growler came from, what it replaced, and why the men and women who fly it consider electronic warfare to be not a supporting role but the decisive edge in modern air combat. The story of the EA-18G Growler begins not with the Growler itself, but with the problem it was designed to solve, and the long history of aircraft that came before it trying to solve that same problem. Electronic warfare as a discipline is almost as old as powered flight itself. From the earliest days of radar in World War II, militaries have understood that the ability to see the enemy before the enemy sees you is worth more than almost any other advantage on the battlefield. And conversely, if you can take away the enemy's ability to see, you take away their ability to fight effectively. During World War II, Allied bombers flying over Nazi Germany carried early jamming equipment designed to confuse German radar operators and make it harder to direct anti-aircraft fire. The results were imperfect but promising. By the time the Korean War and early Cold War era arrived, both the United States and the Soviet Union were investing heavily in dedicated electronic warfare aircraft and systems. The United States Air Force and Navy developed a range of specialized platforms designed specifically to jam enemy radar and communications, operating alongside strike packages to protect attacking aircraft from surface-to-air missile systems that were becoming increasingly lethal. The war in Vietnam brought the challenge of electronic warfare into sharp focus for the United States military. North Vietnamese forces, supported by Soviet advisors and equipped with Soviet surface-to-air missile systems, proved capable of shooting down American aircraft at alarming rates. The SA-2 Guideline missile, guided by the Fansong radar, was responsible for hundreds of American aircraft losses during the conflict. In response, the United States developed the Wild Weasel concept, using specially modified aircraft to hunt and destroy enemy radar and missile systems. The phrase that became the motto of those crews said everything about their mission. They called themselves the first in, last out. They went in ahead of the strike package to suppress the defenses, and they stayed behind to make sure nothing came up to engage the aircraft leaving. Alongside the Wild Weasels, the Navy developed a dedicated electronic warfare aircraft that would become one of the most important platforms of the Vietnam era and beyond. That aircraft was the EA-6B Prowler, which entered service in 1971 and would fly for more than 4 decades with the United States Navy and Marine Corps. The Prowler was based on the A-6 Intruder airframe and carried a crew of 4, with 1 pilot and 3 electronic countermeasures officers operating a sophisticated jamming system. For its time, the Prowler was remarkable. It could carry multiple jamming pods, operate across a wide range of radar frequencies, and coordinate electronic attack missions with a level of sophistication that no other Western aircraft could match. The Prowler flew in Vietnam, in the Gulf War of 1991, over the Balkans throughout the 1990s, in Afghanistan after 2001, and in Iraq in 2003. For decades, it was the backbone of American airborne electronic warfare. But by the early 2000s, the Prowler was aging badly. Its avionics were outdated, its airframe was showing the wear of decades of carrier operations, and its crew workload was far beyond what modern human factors guidelines would consider acceptable. The 3 electronic countermeasures officers sitting in the back of the aircraft were managing an enormously complex system with 1970s-era interfaces that required constant manual operation. Every jamming pod had to be configured individually. Threat libraries had to be updated by hand. The cognitive burden on the crew was immense, and as threats evolved to include more sophisticated and rapidly changing radar systems, the Prowlers struggled to keep pace. The United States Navy began exploring replacement options in the 1990s. The requirement was daunting. The new aircraft had to match or exceed the Prowler's jamming capability while operating from carrier decks, carrying a smaller crew, and keeping pace with evolving threats that would only grow more sophisticated over the coming decades. Several different approaches were considered, including variants of new airframes and modifications to existing platforms. Ultimately, the Navy made a decision that was both pragmatic and ambitious. Rather than developing an entirely new aircraft from scratch, it would take the airframe that was already becoming the backbone of carrier aviation, the FA-18F Super Hornet, and transform it into the most capable electronic warfare platform the United States had ever fielded. The result was the EA-18G Growler. The program began in earnest in the late 1990s, with Boeing receiving a contract to develop the new electronic attack variant of the Super Hornet. The aircraft retained approximately 90% of the Super Hornet's components, which dramatically reduced development costs and simplified the logistics of maintaining 2 variants of the same basic aircraft side by side on carrier decks. The remaining 10% of the aircraft was completely redesigned to accommodate the electronic warfare mission, with the 20mm cannon removed to make room for electronic systems, specialized avionics installed throughout the airframe, and the wingtip pylons replaced with ANALQ 218 electronic support measures, receivers designed to detect, classify, and locate enemy radar emissions with extraordinary precision. The EA-18G made its first flight on August 15, 2006 at the Boeing facility in St. Louis, Missouri. The test flight lasted approximately an hour and was described by the program office as going exactly as planned. Over the following 2 years, the aircraft underwent an extensive flight test program that evaluated its electronic warfare systems, its compatibility with carrier operations, its performance across the flight envelope, and its ability to carry and employ the full range of weapons and jamming systems it would need in combat. The testing revealed the aircraft to be everything the Navy had hoped for. It was fast, agile, and capable of operating in the same threat environments as the Super Hornets it would be flying alongside, which meant Growler crews could go places the Prowler could never have followed. The EA-18G achieved initial operational capability with Electronic Attack Squadron 129, the Vikings, at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island in Washington State in September 2009. Whidbey Island has been and remains the home of the United States Navy's entire Growler force. Every Electronic Attack Squadron in the Navy trains there, maintains its aircraft there when not deployed, and returns there between operational commitments. The base sits on a large island in Puget Sound, and the sound of Growler's flying training missions has become part of the daily life of the surrounding communities, a subject of occasional friction and enormous local pride in equal measure. The transition from the Prowler to the Growler happened over several years, with Prowler squadrons gradually converting to the new aircraft as deliveries from Boeing increased. The final EA-6B Prowlers were retired from Navy service in 2015, ending a career that had spanned more than 4 decades. The Marine Corps held onto its Prowlers slightly longer before transitioning to a different arrangement for electronic warfare support. But by the time the Prowler was gone, the Growler had already proven itself in combat in ways that left no doubt it was a worthy successor. The EA-18G Growler entered combat for the first time in support of operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, where American forces were conducting ongoing counterterrorism and counterinsurgency missions. While those environments did not present the kind of sophisticated radar-based air defense threats that the Growler was primarily designed to counter, the aircraft demonstrated its value in a different way. Its ability to jam communications, disrupt enemy electronic systems, and support ground forces by degrading the ability of insurgent networks to coordinate their activities proved to be enormously useful in a type of warfare that had almost nothing to do with traditional surface-to-air missile suppression. The Growler's communications jamming capability, which allows it to disrupt radio frequencies used by enemy forces to detonate improvised explosive devices and coordinate attacks, saved an untold number of lives during operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Electronic warfare is not only about blinding enemy radar, it is about dominating the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which in a counterinsurgency environment means being able to prevent enemy forces from using their communication systems effectively. The Growler brought that capability to the fight in a way that no previous aircraft in the Navy's inventory could match. The first major test of the Growler in a more traditional air defense suppression role came in 2011 during Operation Odyssey Dawn, the international military intervention in Libya. When United States and coalition forces moved to establish a no-fly zone over Libya and strike targets associated with the government of Muammar Gaddafi, they faced a Libyan air defense network that included Soviet-era surface-to-air missile systems that required suppression before other aircraft could operate safely. Growlers from the USS Enterprise and other platforms in the region flew missions to jam Libyan radar systems and support the suppression of enemy air defenses effort that opened up Libyan airspace to coalition operations. The Libya operation was an important early demonstration of the Growler's ability to operate in a more conventional air defense suppression role, and it validated the Navy's decision to invest in the platform. The Libyan air defense network was not particularly advanced compared to what the Growler would eventually face, but the operation provided valuable experience for crews and gave program managers an opportunity to assess the aircraft's performance in a real combat environment. Over the following years, the Growler continued to evolve. Software updates improved the capability of its electronic support measure system, allowing it to detect and classify a wider range of radar signals with greater speed and accuracy. New threat libraries were developed and distributed to operational squadrons, keeping pace with the proliferation of new radar systems around the world. The relationship between the Growler's passive detection systems and its active jamming systems was refined through operational experience and laboratory testing, making the aircraft more effective at the fundamental task of finding enemy radars and deciding how best to attack them. The next significant combat test came in 2014 and 2015, when United States and coalition forces launched an air campaign against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. While the Islamic State did not possess sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems of the kind the Growler was designed to defeat, the aircraft continued to play a valuable role in the campaign by providing electronic warfare support that degraded the enemy's ability to communicate and coordinate. The Growler flew missions over both Iraq and Syria, operating from carriers in the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, and continued to refine its crews' skills in executing the complex coordination required for effective electronic attack operations in a congested battlespace shared with dozens of coalition partners. It was during the Syria conflict period that the Growler's role in a more complex geopolitical environment became apparent. Russia had deployed advanced surface-to-air missile systems to Syria in support of the Assad government, creating an environment where the electromagnetic spectrum was far more contested than anything American forces had experienced in the post-Cold War era. Russian forces were not the target of American operations in Syria, but their presence and their active use of sophisticated radar and electronic warfare systems created a complex environment that Growler crews had to navigate carefully. The experience of operating in an environment where a near-peer adversary's electronic systems were active and potentially hostile was invaluable preparation for what was coming. The Growler's most significant pre-Iran combat operations in the modern era came during the extended campaign against Houthi forces in Yemen that intensified after Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea, beginning in late 2023. American naval forces, operating in the Red Sea and surrounding waters, conducted regular strikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, and Growlers deployed with carrier strike groups provided electronic warfare support for those operations. The Houthis had acquired a range of radar-guided weapons and air defense systems, and the Growler's ability to suppress those systems was important to the safety of American strike aircraft. The Yemen operations also gave Growler crews extensive practice in the specific operational patterns that would prove directly relevant to Operation Epic Fury, flying from carrier decks in confined maritime spaces, coordinating with a complex mix of aircraft types, managing electronic warfare in an environment where friendly forces were operating in close proximity, and sustaining high operational tempo over an extended period, all became routine for crews who would later form the core of the squadrons operating against Iran. To truly understand why the EA-18G Growler is so valuable, you have to understand what it can do that no other aircraft in the American inventory can replicate. The Growler's capabilities are built around a simple but extraordinarily difficult premise. In modern warfare, the side that controls the electromagnetic spectrum controls the battlefield. Radar is how militaries see. Communications are how they coordinate. Data links are how they share information and target their weapons. If you can disrupt, deny, or destroy those capabilities, you have not just damaged the enemy's ability to fight, you have fundamentally changed the nature of the battle in your favor. The Growler's primary electronic warfare system is built around three interconnected components. The first is the ANALQ-218 Electronic Support Measure System, mounted in pods on the aircraft's wingtips. This system is essentially the aircraft's ears. It listens across an enormous range of radar frequencies, detecting signals from enemy radar systems with extraordinary sensitivity. When a radar signal is detected, the ANALQ-218 can classify it, identify it against a library of known threat systems, and determine its direction and, in many cases, its location on the ground. The crew receives this information in real time, giving them a continuously updated picture of the electromagnetic environment around them. The second component is the ALQ-99 Tactical Jamming System, which has been the Growler's primary active jamming tool since the aircraft entered service. The ALQ-99 consists of pods that can be carried on the aircraft's wing and fuselage stations, with each pod containing a jamming transmitter designed to operate in a specific range of radar frequencies. A fully loaded Growler can carry up to 5 ALQ-99 pods, covering multiple frequency bands simultaneously and providing a broad jamming umbrella that can protect not only the Growler itself, but other aircraft operating nearby. The jamming works by flooding the enemy radar's frequency with noise powerful enough to drown out the returns it is trying to detect, effectively blinding the radar operator and preventing the system from tracking or engaging incoming aircraft. The third component, and the one that represents the future of the Growler's jamming capability, is the ANALQ-249 Next Generation Jammer Midband, which has been transitioning into operational service in recent years. The NGJMB is a fundamentally different kind of jamming system compared to the ALQ-99. Where the ALQ-99 uses older traveling wave tube technology to generate its jamming signals, the NGJMB uses active electronically scanned array antennas that can steer their jamming beams electronically without any mechanical movement across a broad range of frequencies with a speed and precision that the older system simply cannot match. The AESA technology also allows the NGJMB to employ more sophisticated jamming techniques, including cognitive electronic warfare approaches that can adapt in real time to changes in how the enemy radar is operating. Complementing the jamming systems is the Growler's weapons capability. Unlike its predecessor, the Prowler, which relied on other aircraft to do the actual shooting of anti-radiation missiles, The Growler can both jam and kill enemy radar systems on its own. The primary weapon for this hard-kill mission is the AGM-88 family of anti-radiation missiles, which come in several variants with progressively more capable guidance systems. The AGM-88 homes in on the electromagnetic emissions of enemy radar systems, meaning that if a radar is transmitting, the missile can find it. More advanced versions of the missile include memory systems that allow them to continue tracking and hitting a target even if the radar operator shuts down the radar after the missile is fired. The operator cannot save themselves simply by turning off the system. The missile remembers where the signal was coming from and continues to the last known location. The combination of jamming and anti-radiation missile capability gives the Growler what military planners call a suppress or destroy option against every radar it encounters. If a radar system can be effectively jammed to the point where it cannot contribute to the air defense fight, the Growler can suppress it without firing a shot, preserving the anti-radiation missiles for targets that are harder to defeat electronically. If a radar is proving resilient to jamming, or if it is associated with a particularly high-value target, the Growler can engage it kinetically with an anti-radiation missile. This flexibility makes the Growler enormously more effective in a dynamic combat environment than a platform limited to only one of these two approaches. The Growler also retains a meaningful self-defense capability that sets it apart from pure electronic warfare platforms. Because it is based on the Super Hornet airframe, the Growler can carry AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles for self-defense against enemy fighters, giving its crew the ability to engage airborne threats if they are encountered during a mission. This matters because electronic warfare aircraft are high-value targets. Enemy commanders know that suppressing the Growler is the first step toward being able to employ their surface-to-air missile systems effectively, which makes the Growler a priority target for any enemy fighter force that can reach it. The ability to defend itself against those threats, rather than relying entirely on escort fighters, makes the Growler considerably more operationally flexible. Beyond its individual capabilities, the Growler's impact is multiplied by its ability to operate as part of a networked force. The aircraft can share electronic warfare data with other platforms in real time, giving strike packages a shared picture of the electromagnetic environment that helps pilots and commanders make better decisions about how to approach defended targets. As the United States military has invested more heavily in networked warfare concepts, the Growler has evolved from a platform that operates as a discrete supporting element to one that functions as a node in a much larger integrated system, sharing information up and down the chain and coordinating its effects with those of other electronic warfare assets, including ground-based systems and space-based capabilities. The Growler's crew of two, consisting of a pilot and a weapons systems officer seated in tandem, represents another significant advantage over the Prowler's four-person crew. Modern avionics and automation have made it possible to manage the electronic warfare mission with two crew members at a level of effectiveness that previously required twice as many people. The weapons systems officer in the rear seat is responsible for managing the electronic warfare systems, operating the jamming pods, tracking threats identified by the ALQ-218, queuing anti-radiation missiles, and coordinating with other aircraft in the formation. The cognitive demands of that job remain enormous, but the tools available to manage it are incomparably better than anything the Prowler crews had to work with. The broader context in which the EA-18G Growler has become so important is the story of how air defense systems have evolved over the past 3 decades. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union spent enormous resources developing and refining surface-to-air missile systems that grew progressively more lethal and more difficult to defeat. The Soviet S-300 family of systems, which began entering service in the late 1970s and has continued to be updated and refined ever since, represents one of the most significant threats to American air power ever developed. Its ability to engage targets at long range, at high and low altitudes, and in the presence of electronic jamming, made it a system that American planners took extremely seriously. After the Cold War, the proliferation of advanced surface-to-air missile systems to countries outside the former Soviet Union created a new set of challenges for American military planners. Nations like Iran, Syria, Libya, and others acquired variants of Soviet and Russian air defense systems and supplemented them with indigenously developed radar and missile capabilities. The result was a world in which the United States could no longer assume that its aircraft would be operating in permissive airspace simply because it was not fighting Russia or China directly. Regional adversaries had acquired the tools to impose real costs on American air operations, and countering those tools required a dedicated capability of exactly the kind the Growler provides. Iran's air defense network, specifically, has been a subject of intense American study for decades. Iran has operated variants of Soviet-era surface-to-air missile systems, combined with indigenously developed radar and air defense systems, and has invested heavily in making its network as resilient and redundant as possible. The system is designed to complicate American strike planning by presenting multiple overlapping layers of coverage across different altitude bands and frequency ranges, forcing attackers to suppress threats across a wide area simultaneously rather than defeating them sequentially. The development of the Growler's capabilities over the years has been shaped in part by the specific characteristics of threats like the Iranian air defense network, and the success of Growler operations in Operation Epic Fury reflects the years of preparation that have gone into understanding and countering that specific threat. The challenge of defeating a layered integrated air defense system like Iran's is one of the central problems of modern air warfare. A single type of jamming, or a single type of weapon, is rarely sufficient to defeat a well-designed and well-operated air defense network. The enemy can change frequencies to evade jamming, can shut down and reposition radar systems to complicate anti-radiation missile attacks, and can operate in a mode that minimizes electromagnetic emissions while relying on passive sensors and data links to maintain some level of air defense coverage. Defeating these tactics requires the kind of adaptability and persistence that the Growler is specifically designed to provide. One of the most important aspects of the Growler's approach to this problem is the concept of integrated fires, which combines the electronic effects of jamming with the kinetic effects of anti-radiation missiles and coordinates both with the strike aircraft that are trying to reach their targets. In a well-planned integrated fire scenario, the Growler arrives in the battlespace ahead of the strike package and begins jamming enemy radars, forcing operators to choose between shutting down and losing coverage, or continuing to operate and risking an anti-radiation missile attack. Strike aircraft use the jamming coverage to approach their targets with reduced risk of detection. If enemy radar operators attempt to illuminate the strike aircraft to guide surface-to-air missiles, the anti-radiation missiles are waiting for them. If they choose to shut down, the strike aircraft approach their targets without effective radar guidance opposing them. This fundamental dynamic, forcing the enemy to choose between two bad options, is what makes the Growler so effective. There is no simple solution for an enemy air defense commander facing a Growler-supported strike. Jamming the radar makes it temporarily ineffective. Shooting at the aircraft that is jamming you invites an anti-radiation missile in return. Shutting down to avoid that missile lets the strike aircraft through. The combination of effects creates a decision problem that cannot be resolved in the enemy's favor, and that is precisely the point. The evolution of the Growler's capabilities to address increasingly sophisticated threats has continued throughout the aircraft's operational life. The introduction of cognitive electronic warfare techniques, which use machine learning and artificial intelligence to allow jamming systems to adapt automatically to changes in how enemy radars are operating, represents the next frontier in the Growler's development. Traditional jamming systems are programmed with a fixed set of techniques that are applied based on the type of radar being jammed. Cognitive systems can observe how the radar responds to jamming and automatically adjust the jamming approach in real time to find the most effective technique against that specific radar in that specific operating environment. This kind of adaptive jamming is much harder for enemy operators to counter because there is no fixed pattern they can train against or develop countermeasures for. The squadrons that fly the EA-18G Growler are among the most specialized in the United States Navy. Each electronic attack squadron, designated with the prefix VAQ followed by a number, is home to approximately 12 to 14 aircraft and the crews and maintainers who keep them flying. The training pipeline for Growler crews is long and demanding. Pilots who fly the aircraft already hold carrier qualifications and typically have previous experience in tactical jets. Weapon systems officers who occupy the rear seat of the Growler go through an extensive training program at the Fleet Replacement Squadron at Whidbey Island that covers the theory of electronic warfare, the operation of the specific systems installed in the aircraft, and the tactics and procedures used in combat. The weapon systems officer role in the Growler is one of the most cognitively demanding jobs in naval aviation. During a mission, the WSO, as they are known, may be simultaneously managing multiple jamming pods operating on different frequencies, tracking threats identified by the ALQ-218 system, queuing anti-radiation missiles against priority targets, coordinating with other aircraft in the formation via data link and radio, and advising the pilot on the tactical situation as it evolves. All of this happens in a compressed timeline, often while the aircraft is maneuvering aggressively and while the electromagnetic environment around it is changing rapidly. The demands of the job require not only deep technical knowledge of the systems involved, but also the ability to make rapid, high-stakes decisions under enormous pressure. The electronic attack community within the Navy has developed a culture of technical excellence that is distinct from other parts of naval aviation. Growler crews are expected to understand their systems at a level that goes beyond simply operating them according to checklists. They need to understand the underlying physics of what their jamming is doing to enemy radar, why different techniques work better against different types of emitters, and how to adapt their approach when the tactics they planned on the ground are not producing the expected results in the air. This depth of technical understanding is what allows experienced Growler crews to improvise effectively when conditions change, rather than being limited to the specific scenarios they train for. The relationship between electronic warfare and the rest of the strike package has also evolved significantly as the Growler has matured. In the early days of electronic warfare, jamming aircraft were often treated as a supporting element that provided a background service to strike aircraft without being deeply integrated into the planning process. The Prowler era saw some improvement in this integration, but the limitations of the technology and the complexity of coordinating a four-person crew with the rest of the formation created friction. The Growler, with its modern data links and integrated avionics, has enabled a much tighter integration between the electronic warfare mission and the broader strike mission, to the point where Growler crews are now routinely included from the beginning of the mission planning process, rather than being brought in at the end to provide electronic support for a plan that has already been made. Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, as the home of all Navy Growler squadrons, has become a center of expertise in electronic warfare that has few, if any, parallels in the world. The aggregation of experience, institutional knowledge, and technical expertise at Whidbey has produced a community that understands the electronic warfare mission at a depth that cannot be replicated by any adversary that treats electronic warfare as a secondary concern. The culture of continuous improvement that the Whidbey community has developed, driven by the constant evolution of threats and the steady introduction of new capabilities, ensures that the Growler force remains at the cutting edge of a discipline that is becoming more important to military operations with every passing year. Australia operates the EA-18G as well, making it the only foreign operator of the aircraft. The Royal Australian Air Force took delivery of its first Growlers in 2015 and has integrated them into its air combat capability alongside its FA-18F Super Hornets. The Australian Growler community trains closely with the United States Navy, participating in exercises at Whidbey Island and elsewhere, and has developed a level of interoperability with American electronic attack squadrons that makes combined operations straightforward. The Australian Growlers have participated in several multinational exercises and have served as an important demonstration that the aircraft and its associated tactics can be operated effectively by allies who are willing to make the institutional investment in the specialized training the mission demands. Looking at the operational record of the EA-18G Growler across its career to date, a clear picture emerges of an aircraft that has consistently delivered capabilities that no other platform in the American inventory can provide. From its early missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, where it demonstrated the value of communications jamming in a counterinsurgency environment, to Libya, where it first operated in a traditional air defense suppression role, to the sustained operations over Yemen that prepared crews for the high-tempo carrier environment, to the extraordinary demands of Operation Epic Fury over Iran, the Growler has proven itself as an indispensable element of American air power. The timing of the EA-18G's operational maturity has coincided with a period in which electronic warfare has become more important, not less. In the early post-Cold War years, there was a school of thought in some quarters of the American military that stealth technology had made electronic warfare somewhat redundant. If aircraft could not be detected by radar in the first place, the argument went, jamming the radar was less critical. That argument was never entirely persuasive to the electronic warfare community, which understood that no stealth aircraft is invisible across all radar frequencies in all conditions, and that even the stealthiest aircraft benefits from electronic warfare support that degrades the enemy's ability to track and engage it. The experiences of Operation Epic Fury have firmly settled that debate. Even with the most advanced stealth bombers in the American inventory flying against Iranian targets, the Growlers were still essential. Iran retained active air defense systems that posed a real threat to strike aircraft throughout the campaign, and the sustained suppression work done by the Growler force was directly responsible for the level of freedom of action that American aircraft enjoyed over Iranian territory as the operation progressed. Defense One and other outlets covering the campaign quoted analysts who made the point directly. The Growler is not a legacy system that stealth has made obsolete. It is the enabling system that makes everything else possible, including stealth operations. The future of the EA-18G Growler program is focused on continued capability enhancement that will extend the aircraft's relevance well beyond its originally planned service life. The introduction of the full next-generation jammer system, which will eventually include a low-band variant in addition to the already deployed mid-band system, will give the Growler comprehensive coverage across the radar frequency spectrum that adversary air defense systems use. The cognitive electronic warfare capabilities being integrated into the next-generation jammer will allow the aircraft to adapt to threats faster than human operators can respond, dealing with new and unknown radar systems with an agility that the older ALQ-99 system simply cannot match. The Block 2 upgrade program for the Growler itself will bring advanced cockpit system improvements drawn from the Super Hornet Block 3 program, along with additional enhancements to the electronic warfare suite that will further improve the aircraft's performance against the threats it is most likely to face in future conflicts. The program office has been explicit that the Growler is expected to remain in frontline service into the 2040s and possibly beyond, as the United States military works toward the next generation of aircraft and systems that will eventually succeed it. The broader context for the Growler's future is a global security environment in which electronic warfare has become one of the primary domains of military competition. Russia and China have both invested heavily in electronic warfare capabilities over the past 2 decades, fielding sophisticated jamming systems, developing advanced radar technologies, and integrating electronic warfare into their military operations at every level. The competition in the electromagnetic spectrum between the United States and these potential adversaries is one of the defining technological contests of the current era, and the Growler is America's primary airborne tool for winning that competition. China's development of advanced integrated air defense systems, including the HQ-9 family of surface-to-air missiles and a range of other radar and missile capabilities, has created a threat environment in the Pacific that American planners take extremely seriously. Russia's deployment of advanced S-400 and developing S-500 surface-to-air missile systems, along with a sophisticated electromagnetic warfare capability that it has employed in Ukraine and elsewhere, represents the other major challenge that American electronic warfare planners must prepare for. Against both of these threat sets, the Growler and its next-generation jammer represent critical capabilities that no other American aircraft can provide. The lessons being learned in Operation Epic Fury are already being studied by crews, planners, and program managers who are thinking about how those lessons apply to a future conflict in the Pacific or European theaters. How does the Growler perform against the specific radar systems it would face in those environments? What tactics work best when the enemy has had years to observe American electronic warfare operations and develop countermeasures? How do you sustain Growler operations at the required tempo when the operational distances are far greater than anything seen in the Middle East? These are the questions that the Growler community is working through, driven by the real-world operational data that only a combat operation of the scale of Epic Fury can provide. The EA-18G Growler is, in many ways, a perfect expression of a principle that military historians and theorists have described for generations, but that modern technology has finally made possible to execute at the scale and speed that combat requires. That principle is that war is ultimately an information contest. The side that sees more clearly, coordinates more effectively, and denies those advantages to the enemy is the side that wins. The Growler operationalizes that principle in the electromagnetic domain with a combination of listening capability, jamming capability, and kinetic strike capability that together give American forces a decisive advantage in the one domain of warfare that shapes everything else. When people watch footage of bombs falling on Iranian targets, when they see B-52s launching from distant bases, when they see F-35s streaking toward hardened facilities, they are watching the visible part of the air campaign. What they cannot see is the electromagnetic warfare that made all of it possible. They cannot see the Growler flying ahead of the strike package, detecting radar signals, jamming air defense systems, and hunting down and killing the radar emitters that would otherwise guide missiles toward American aircraft. They cannot see the electromagnetic shield that the Growlers threw over the battlespace that allowed stealth and non-stealth aircraft alike to operate with a level of freedom that stunned Iranian commanders and changed the course of the operation. That invisibility is not a weakness of the Growler, it is the point. The most effective weapon in a conflict is often the one that shapes the battle before the shooting starts, that takes away the enemy's ability to fight effectively before they even know the fight has begun. The EA-18G Growler does exactly that, and it does it better than any other aircraft in the world. It is not the most famous aircraft in the American arsenal. It does not get the headlines that stealth bombers get, or the recognition that fighter jets receive. But ask anyone who plans or executes American air operations, and they will tell you that no aircraft flying today is more important to the mission than the Growler. The next time you hear about American aircraft operating in a contested environment, achieving air superiority over an adversary that spent years and billions of dollars preparing to deny it, remember that somewhere in that fight, almost certainly flying the most dangerous part of the mission, there is a Growler crew doing the work that makes everything else possible. They are the first in and the last out, continuing a tradition that goes back to the wild weasels of Vietnam, carried forward by the Prowler crews of the Cold War and the Gulf War and the Balkans, and now embodied in the EA-18G Growler and the men and women of the electronic attack community who fly it. The EA-18G Growler is not just an aircraft. It is a philosophy of warfare made airborne, the expression of a fundamental truth about how modern battles are won, and the reason that when the United States goes to war in the air, it does so with a level of confidence in the electromagnetic domain that no adversary can yet match.